always admired as a person because of her courage and her vision. I mean, she was someone who had a tremendous amount of I don't know how to say it. She had so many abilities. She would have been good at almost at many things. Not just she would have been great if she stayed as a social worker, which was her original job. And when she actually flew across the Atlantic, I think when she filled out forms, she put her profession down as a social worker, not as a flyer. That came later. She couldn't go back to being a social worker after the fame that came to her after crossing the Atlantic, actually, for the first flight, the friendship flight with the two men. I admired her as an individual, as a thinker. She was a writer. She certainly was one of the most famous women of her time, her and Eleanor Roosevelt, and they were friends. She took Eleanor Roosevelt up on flights. They enjoyed each other's company. There's so many photographs of Amelia. She was so photogenic, and that it was great to have all those photos of her to look at and to pick and choose and to get that kind of boyish quality that she had. People compared her to Lindbergh. She even looked kind of like Lindbergh. She didn't live to be 40. You know, she's always kind of youthful. She actually seems to have had an appearance of being 40. She didn't want to grow old. Gore Vidal was a small child and knew her. She was involved with Gore Vidal's father. She said to his father that she didn't want to be 40 anyway, so she was a risk taker. There was a very good chance she was not going to be able to make that trip, and she knew it, finish that trip, but she didn't mind going out with a bang, I think, in some sense. When I first started sculpting her, when I usually do a statue of someone, I'll do a portrait bust, a life-size bust that is separate from the figure. And I'll do a small sketch. Traditionally, when you're doing a sculpture of someone, you're creating what's called a maquette, creating a small model, basically. And it's a conceptual model. The reason you do that is you can work quickly and you can just get your idea down and you're not trying to get details. And because you have to move it around and as you're changing your idea, you're not worried about details because you're going to mess them up anyway when you move it around. And you have to have a fragile little armature in it to be able to move it easily, so it can't be large, because you need a larger, strong armature as you get larger, and then you can't move it as easily. So I did a small clay model of her. I read several books about her and saw film footage and looked at photos, of course, and I felt like since she died in the 30s, and she was much of what she had accomplished was in the 30s, I wanted to get a sense of her. And knowing sculpture from the 30s, I wanted to have a sense of the Art Deco, so I referred to it in my sculpture. So I have her standing on a cloud, which is on a globe, which is kind of an Art Deco element, stylized in an Art Deco way. And so much of her life was about the globe. It was about going from one place to the other. And, that's what made her famous. And she had to get from Canada to Wales. She was flying across the Atlantic. And when she went around the world, again, it was about the globe. So I wanted to get the sense that she was a world figure, of her standing on this globe and show on the globe where she flew. And I marked on the globe where she flew. And actually in the sculpture, I showed where she disappeared. And at that point in the globe, I have a sun, and I have an Icarus against it. And because she was like Icarus, she flew too close to the sun in a way, and I have her in intaglio, which is not to show her in relief, but to show the space where she would have been, but she fell out of the sky, so she fell out of the sun. So that was one way of looking at her. Then I did another sculpture of her in her long pants instead of the joffers. So I did her in the long pants. The one where she's standing on the globe, she's in joffers, and she's in her in that pilot outfit that they would wear, which they got from riding what people wore when they rode horses. There wasn't a pilot costume per se, so they took the outfit that people wore when they rode, and with a leather jacket. And so later I did another sculpture of her that's 3 feet high. Again, it's a study for a larger piece, which I hope to do sometime, of her that's over life size. And I made her just standing, as she often did, very casually, with one leg bent, one leg straight, and wearing a leather jacket and the scarf around her neck that she often wore a scarf. In fact, the first flight that she flew over with the 2 men, and she flew the Atlantic, being the first woman who got across the Atlantic, somebody grabbed her scarf as a memento when she got to the other side of the Atlantic. She often wore scarves. You see it. I think it's interesting sculpting her and trying to get that sense of the kind of androgynous quality that she had, and her hair that was so. She straightened her hair actually, but it looks casual and it looks. But that was it's studied, a little bit. She knew she was conscious of her appearance. It was fun doing that sculpture.